It started with a headset and a controller, and ended with a multi-million-dollar international cybercrime investigation. In 2016, in the quiet suburban town of Irvington, New York, a 13-year-old named Ellis Ramirez sat hunched over his gaming chair, headset snug against his ears, eyes glued to the screen, thumbs dancing across his controller. His room, cluttered with energy drink cans, LED lights, and a Call of Duty poster curling at the edges, was his entire universe. Like millions of other teenagers, Ellis spent countless hours immersed in digital firefights. But unlike most, this was the beginning of something far bigger. It was during a particularly chaotic round of Call of Duty, Ghosts, his favorite at the time, that fate decided to nudge the first domino. "Get wrecked, noob," Ellis spat into his mic, a smug grin curling on his face. "Tell your mom I'll be home late." Standard trash talk, nothing special. He was good at it, better than most. Maybe too good. He knew how to push buttons, how to hit just the right nerve. But then came a response that froze him mid-snicker. "Yo, how's the weather in Irvington?" the other player asked, voice flat and cold. The laughter died in Ellis's throat. "What did you say?" Ellis asked, trying to play it off cool, but his pulse was hammering in his ears. "I said, how's the weather in Irvington, New York? That's where you live, right?" Ellis yanked off his headset, heart hammering. He stared at his screen like it might blink back at him. How did this guy know where he lived? He hadn't given out any information. He was sure of it. At first, he was convinced he was being pranked. But then he started digging. He remembered the player's gamer tag. He messaged him. No reply. He looked up the account on forums. Nothing. It was like the guy had vanished. But the fear? That stuck. For days, Ellis couldn't sleep properly. His mind spiraled. What if the guy had more info? His address, his school, his family. Eventually, curiosity overtook fear. He began Googling phrases like, "How do people find IP addresses through Call of Duty?" and "Can you trace someone through Xbox Live?" And that's when he discovered the rabbit hole. IP sniffers, packet tracing, social engineering, and open source intelligence tools. It was all there. Forums, guides, even YouTube videos. It wasn't magic. It wasn't hacking in the Hollywood sense, but it was real. And suddenly Ellis realized something that would shape the rest of his life. Anyone could find anyone, if you knew where to look. From that point on, Ellis was hooked. He started small. He'd join random lobbies in various games and run IP sniffers in the background just to see what he could find. When he realized how easy it was to narrow someone down to a zip code, he was stunned, empowered. He felt like he had superpowers. Soon, he wasn't just gaming. He was learning. At first, it was copy-paste stuff from paste bins and sketchy hacking forums with dark UIs and even darker humor. Then he moved on to basic scripting, Python, PowerShell, packet tracing. By 14, he had a VPN, a Linux box, and was watching DEF CON talks instead of Netflix. His parents? They thought he was just really into gaming. He kept his door closed and his grades were fine. Why worry? But Ellis had already slipped into a world most adults didn't even know existed. Late at night, while the lights in his neighborhood flickered out one by one, he was online, messaging with strangers using pseudonyms like Void Ghost, N3, Film, Carbonic, and Zetabyte. They weren't friends. Not really. They were contacts, mentors, collaborators, and they taught him the rules of the underground. Rule #1. Don't trust anyone. Rule #2. Never brag. Rule #3. Always cover your tracks. Ellis broke all three, eventually. But back then, he was just soaking it all up. And it wasn't long before someone in a private IRC chat, a guy called Slimzer0, introduced him to a new hustle, OG handles, Instagram and Twitter usernames that were short, rare, and desirable. You ever get an account that's just like, @Alex? Slimzer0 wrote one night. Ellis. Nah, sounds cool though. Slimzer0. It's more than cool, it's money. Big money. And so Ellis learned about account hijacking. The method was crude but effective. SIM swapping, phishing, brute forcing weak passwords, exploiting password reset flows, whatever it took. Once inside the account, you changed the email, changed the phone, and locked the original owner out. Then you listed the handle on black market forums like OG Users or Kick forums and watched the crypto roll in. Ellis's first stolen handle was @Wave. He flipped it for $3,000 worth of Bitcoin. A week later, @Blue earned him $4,800. Then came @Prime, a big one, which he sold for $11K to someone in Dubai who called himself J3T-Boy. The money came fast, faster than Ellis could process, and with every sale, he dove deeper. He upgraded his laptop, bought a second phone, started using encrypted messaging apps. His schoolwork suffered, not that anyone really noticed. But something in Ellis was changing. He wasn't just a kid anymore. He was a player in a game far bigger than Call of Duty. He was a digital thief, a ghost. And yet, the thrill began to wear off. The money was cool. But the challenge? That's what got him high. That's when he started asking questions in the IRCs he wasn't supposed to. How do people really make millions? Is it true you can take over a phone number and get into someone's bank? What's the next level? And the name kept coming up. SIM swapping. SIM swapping wasn't just a tool for stealing Twitter handles. It was a gateway. If you could intercept the victim's texts and calls, you could reset anything. Email accounts, crypto wallets, bank apps, and the best part, all you needed was a guy inside. The group called them plugs, AT&T employees, Verizon reps, T-Mobile insiders, low-wage workers who could be bought off for a few $100 to press a few keys. Ellis couldn't believe how easy it sounded. Get the number, get the SIM ported, drain the wallet. He didn't know it yet, but his life was about to cross a line, a point of no return. One night in 2018, he got a message in a private channel. Got a target. You in? Ellis replied, Who? Name's Turpin. Real old money. Real crypto heavy. We're talking 20+ mil. Ellis stared at the screen, his heart pounding. Turpin. He would never forget that name, and neither would the FBI. Apologies for the delay. Let's jump right back in. The night was thick with anticipation. Ellis Ramirez, now 15, stared at his glowing laptop screen, every nerve in his body humming with the excitement of what was to come. He sat in his dark room, shadows stretching across the walls, the only sound the faint hum of his computer and the clack of his fingers on the keyboard. This wasn't just another game, another hack, another stolen username. This was the big league. The message from the hacker group was simple, but it felt like the door to a whole new world was swinging wide open in front of him. Target's name, Turpin, Big Fish, crypto wallets. You in? Ellis's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Turpin. The name rang through his mind. An older, successful man, possibly linked to a multi-million-dollar fortune in cryptocurrency. This wasn't some random social media handle anymore. This was a chance to make a real, irreversible mark. It wasn't just the money. It was the challenge. Could he pull it off? Ellis sat back, steeling himself, then typed his reply. I'm in. He took a deep breath and refocused on the screen. The plan was laid out, clear and simple. Find a contact working at a phone store, pay them to swap the SIM card of the target, and boom, access granted. It sounded like a scene from a heist movie, but it was happening in real life. The plan kicked off the very next morning. Ellis contacted one of his hacker group members, Zetabyte, who had a reliable source inside an AT&T store in Connecticut. The target was ready. His name was Turpin, and as Ellis learned, he was well connected in the tech world, with ties to Match.com and a fortune stashed in a variety of cryptocurrencies. Ellis felt the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just some prank or petty theft. This was real, and if they pulled it off, they'd be swimming in more money than they could ever need, more than Ellis could ever imagine. They had the plan, they had the inside man, and most importantly, they had the key, Turpin's phone number. In the next few hours, the digital gears of this heist began to turn. Ellis sat at his desk, staring at the live chat window with Zetabyte. The details came in fast. "It's done. Contact at the store, swap the SIM. You're in," Zetabyte typed, his words echoing in Ellis's mind like a drumbeat. Without hesitation, Ellis pulled up the necessary tools on his screen. Encrypted messaging apps, VPNs, password managers. Everything he needed to stay anonymous. He was already deep into his world of hacking, but now he felt like a master of it. The young kid from Irvington was about to pull off his first big score, and the tension was electric. He quickly made his move. The first thing Ellis did was reset Turpin's email. It wasn't hard. With the SIM card switch, he now had control over every linked account that required two-factor authentication. Step 1 was done. Turpin's email was now under his control. Next came the crypto wallets. Ellis knew that if they found the right one, they could be sitting on a treasure chest worth millions. He had to be careful. One wrong move and the whole thing would unravel. Minutes passed like hours. Ellis's heart raced as he hacked through Turpin's online life, scouring emails, files, and encrypted accounts. He found something, a file with strings of characters. It was a private key, a key to multiple cryptocurrency wallets, including one labeled simply 24M. Ellis's eyes widened. $24 million. He had found the jackpot. He quickly opened the wallet, his hands shaking as he transferred the cryptocurrency to his own anonymous account. In less than a minute, Ellis had wiped out Turpin's wallet. Just like that, the fortune was gone. $24 million in crypto. Gone. A sense of exhilaration washed over him. It wasn't just the money, it was the validation. He had done it. He was no longer just a kid playing video games or stealing Twitter handles. He was a hacker, a thief, a master of the digital underworld. He couldn't contain his excitement. He quickly texted the hacker group. "It's done. $24 million. We're rich." The response came almost immediately. "Nice job. Now we launder it." And so began the second phase of the operation, the money laundering. Ellis, with the help of his hacker crew, contacted more underground operators to begin selling off the crypto across different exchanges. The cryptocurrency was broken up, sold, and exchanged, slowly being washed clean of its stolen origin. Meanwhile, Ellis started spending. The adrenaline rush from the heist was starting to fade, and all that was left was the hunger for more. He'd spent a few thousand here and there on high-end gaming equipment, but that was just the beginning. First, it was a $50,000 watch. Then $100,000 in cash, stuffed under his bed. A brand new Audi R8, Louis Vuitton, Supreme. Every luxury he could buy, Ellis did. He wanted to bask in his newfound wealth. And for a while, everything seemed perfect. Ellis was living the life most teenagers only dreamed about. He was untouchable, invincible, until the first crack appeared. Turpin wasn't as dumb as Ellis thought. The billionaire began piecing together the puzzle. His crypto was gone. The wallet was drained. And soon, Turpin started getting suspicious. A few private investigators were hired, and they began searching for answers. Ellis, meanwhile, felt untouchable. He kept to his usual routine. He was careful, or so he thought. He didn't know that the people he had stolen from had the resources and connections to track him down. But in the end, it wouldn't be Turpin who brought him down. It would be one of his own. Ellis leaned back in his chair, the soft hum of his computer the only sound in the room. His eyes traced the flickering numbers and letters on the screen, an encrypted stream of activity that made him feel like he was on top of the world. He was 15 years old, and he'd just stolen $24 million in crypto, enough money to live like a king for the rest of his life. But Ellis wasn't content. No, he wasn't going to let it end with a few luxury purchases and a quick splurge. The taste of power was sweet, and he wanted more money, more connections, more respect. He wanted to be someone in the underground world. He wanted to be legendary, but for now, he had to lay low. His parents, still oblivious to what was going on, thought he was just a regular teenager, spending his free time playing video games and keeping his grades up. They never suspected the dark path he was treading. At night, Ellis's room became his fortress, a place where no one could touch him, where he was in control. His hacking group, the ones who had helped him pull off the Turpin heist, were constantly in touch. They were planning the next moves. More heists, more crypto, more scores to hit. But Ellis had one thing on his mind. How could he take the next step and push his limits further? That was when Nick entered the picture. Nick wasn't like the other hackers Ellis had worked with. He was older, around 21, and while he wasn't the sharpest when it came to the technical aspects, he had a certain charm. And more importantly, he was good at one thing: laundering stolen money. Nick was all about the lifestyle, the fast cars, the flashy watches, the parties, and the private jets. He lived in a world where consequences were just words and danger was something that could be easily outrun. Nick quickly latched onto Ellis, feeding off the young hacker's energy and ambition. The two made an excellent pair. Ellis, the genius with the technical know-how, and Nick, the master of living big. They'd spent countless hours celebrating their success, popping champagne bottles in exclusive clubs, boasting on Twitter about their ill-gotten gains, and living a life most people could only dream about. But Nick, in his infinite wisdom, started to do something stupid. He tweeted about their crimes. "Just a reminder, I SIM-swapped my own dad," one tweet read. "Stole 24 million, but can't keep a friend." The irony was lost on Nick. He had become so enamored with the thrill of the crime, the high of living large, that he forgot the most important rule in their world. Don't get caught. The internet never forgets. And the federal task force that had been hunting SIM swappers and crypto thieves, they certainly weren't forgetting. In a desperate bid to stay one step ahead, Nick started buying more extravagant items, bigger watches, flashier cars, more exclusive parties. But his need to brag, to show off, would be his undoing. Ellis, meanwhile, had noticed the shift in Nick's behavior. He had always been a bit reckless, but now it seemed like Nick was trying to attract attention. Ellis, ever the cautious one, started to feel the heat. The $24 million they'd stolen was no longer their secret. And the more Nick boasted, the more likely it was that someone, somewhere, would put the pieces together. Ellis tried to warn him. "Dude, chill with the tweets," he told Nick one night over encrypted messages. "You're bringing way too much heat." But Nick wasn't listening. He was too far gone. It wasn't long before Nick's lavish lifestyle, funded entirely by stolen crypto, started to raise eyebrows. People started talking. They noticed the flashy cars, the diamond watches, the constant parties, and the mysterious wealthy guy who seemed to have no job. How was he getting all this money? And that was when the feds took notice. Nick's social media activity had caught the attention of an investigative unit focused on SIM swapping and cryptocurrency fraud. They'd been tracking people who had made large, unexplained purchases or were living far beyond their means without any legitimate income. The task force had been investigating a different SIM swap case when they stumbled across Nick's name. He was a perfect target. It didn't take long before they connected him to a string of SIM swap operations. Nick's tweets were used as proof. He had practically handed them the case on a silver platter. But the real breakthrough came when they gained access to Nick's iCloud backups. Inside the files, they found what they were looking for: communications between Ellis and Nick, details about the $24 million heist, and the digital footprint linking them both to Turpin's stolen crypto. The task force moved quickly. Nick was arrested for his involvement in the SIM swapping ring, but that was just the beginning. As they pieced together the evidence, they realized that the $24 million crypto heist was just one part of a much larger operation. Ellis, despite his best efforts to lay low, was now on the radar. It wasn't long before the feds came knocking at his door. Ellis's heart skipped a beat as he heard the sound of the doorbell. His mom, always the one to answer the door, opened it with a smile, only to be greeted by two FBI agents. "Are you Mrs. Ramirez?" one of them asked, his voice cold. "We need to speak with your son." Ellis froze, his mind racing. How did they find him? Who told them? His mom, oblivious to the storm brewing around her, stepped aside, allowing the agents inside. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "Where is your son?" one of the agents pressed. "We have reason to believe he's involved in an ongoing criminal investigation." Ellis felt a chill run down his spine. His entire world, the world he had worked so hard to build, was about to come crashing down. His mother's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "My son? He's just a kid. He's not involved in anything criminal." But Ellis could see the agent's eyes narrow. They had him. He had been careful. He had covered his tracks. But in the end, there was one thing he couldn't escape: the mistakes of those around him. And Nick? Nick had made all the mistakes for them both. "Is your son home?" one of the agents asked again, his voice growing more insistent. Ellis stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The game was over. The kid who had started out trash-talking on a video game was now in the fight of his life. The knock on the door should have been a warning, but to Ellis, it felt more like an ambush. His life, the carefully constructed web of hacking, stealing, and lazing in newfound wealth, was about to come crashing down. The FBI had found him. Or worse, they were about to make sure he couldn't slip away, not this time. He stood there, frozen, as his mother looked back and forth between him and the agents standing at their front door. The agents' faces were emotionless, professional. They had done this before. They weren't here to chat about the weather or ask about family matters. They were here for one thing only: to catch him. "Ellis?" one of them asked again, more directly this time. His name echoed in his ears like a death sentence. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He thought about the money, the watches, the cars, the life he'd built, all the while thinking he could outsmart them all. The agents didn't wait for him to say anything. They didn't need to. They were here to arrest him, and they had the evidence. They weren't going to waste time. "Ellis Ramirez, you're under investigation for computer fraud, identity theft, and the illegal possession of stolen property," the first agent said, his voice sharp and clear. "You have the right to remain silent, and anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." His mind raced. The stolen $24 million, Nick's reckless tweets, the crypto wallets, the SIM swapping. He was in too deep. How could he have been so stupid? How could he have ignored the risks? The consequences were inevitable, but the reality of it all felt surreal. His mother looked at him, confused and horrified. "Ellis, what is this? What's going on?" Her voice cracked, a mixture of disbelief and panic. Ellis glanced at her, his face pale. He didn't want her to know. He didn't want her to see how far he'd fallen. He was just a kid. She had no idea what he had done, but there was no going back now. I don't know what they're talking about, Mom," Ellis said quietly, trying to muster some sense of calm, but it was no use. His voice trembled as the weight of his actions crashed down on him. The agents didn't buy it, of course. They had already gathered their evidence: the digital fingerprints, the transactions, the laundered money. Everything was pointing directly to him. They walked into the house with him in tow, leading him to the living room where they began to explain the scope of the investigation. The name Turpin came up, the billionaire whose crypto Ellis had stolen. And that was when everything started to click into place. The FBI was already well aware of the heist, and they had connected the dots. Ellis barely had a moment to process everything before the second agent chimed in. "We've been tracking SIM swapping schemes for a while now. You've made quite a name for yourself, Ellis. It wasn't just one job. It's an entire string of hacks. Social media accounts, personal data, and most notably, $24 million in crypto from a man named Turpin." Ellis felt the room spinning. They knew everything. They knew about his hacking group. They knew about Nick. They knew about the SIM swapping. It was all out in the open. One of the agents, seeing the disbelief on Ellis's face, stepped closer. "You were part of a much bigger operation than you realize. You and your crew were part of a web of crime that spanned across multiple states, multiple victims." Ellis could feel his throat tightening. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered under his breath. He hadn't meant for any of this to happen. It started out as a joke, a thrill. He never imagined it would escalate to something so serious. The agent didn't respond. Instead, they pulled up a screen on their tablet and began showing him screenshots, records of his transactions, communication with other hackers, the stolen crypto. It was all there. Every stolen username, every SIM swap, Every action he'd taken was documented, traced back to him. And then, something that made his heart drop. On the screen was Nick's name, a few tweets, boasting about the stolen money, talking about their lavish lifestyle. The evidence against Nick was as damning as it was against Ellis. But there was something more. A file from Nick's iCloud backup, and inside it, everything. All of the conversations, the planning, and even details about Ellis's involvement. Ellis felt sick. The information that Nick had stored, the things he'd said in the heat of the moment, had just handed over all the proof they needed. "That's not all," the agent continued, his voice now taking on a more ominous tone. "Nick's been talking. He's been cooperating with us, sharing everything he knows about your involvement. He's got details. He's connected you to the heist. He's told us everything." Ellis's blood ran cold. Nick had flipped. His so-called friend had betrayed him. The very same person who had reveled in the success of their crimes, boasted about it, lived it up, had turned on him without hesitation. It was the ultimate betrayal. And yet, in the pit of Ellis's stomach, he couldn't say he was surprised. Nick had always been reckless. He always had to show off. He always had to be the center of attention. But this was a whole new level of self-preservation. Nick had sold him out to save his own skin. In the span of mere hours, Ellis's life had gone from high-flying hacker to an unwilling participant in a federal investigation. "Do you understand the charges against you?" the agent asked, pulling Ellis from his thoughts. Ellis nodded slowly, his mind reeling. He couldn't answer. There was nothing to say. He had cooperated in the past, trying to play by the hacker code. But it was clear now that there was no going back. The feds were in charge now, and they weren't letting him off easy. "We're offering you a chance, Ellis," the second agent spoke up, his voice low, almost sympathetic. "If you cooperate, if you help us track down the rest of your group, we can make sure you get a lesser sentence. But you need to make a decision now. Are you going to face the consequences of your actions, or are you going to turn on the people you've been working with?" Ellis's thoughts spiraled. He'd never imagined it would end like this. Betrayed by Nick, caught by the feds, and now an impossible choice before him: cooperate or face the full weight of the law. The door to his future seemed to close tighter by the second. But Ellis knew one thing: he was no longer the hunter. Now, he was the prey. Part 5. The decision that changed everything. The weight of the decision felt like a 1,000-pound anchor pulling Ellis under the cold, murky waters. His chest tightened, his palms slick with sweat, and he could barely hear the agents' voices anymore. The world around him began to blur as he grappled with the choice they were offering him. It was a choice that, in that moment, seemed impossible to make. Betray everyone he had once called a partner, or face the full wrath of the justice system. For a few moments, time stood still. He wasn't just a 15-year-old kid anymore. He wasn't some carefree gamer. No, he was a criminal. He had stolen millions, hacked into the lives of innocent people, manipulated the digital world for his own gain. He had crossed lines. Lines that, at the time, seemed so far away. But now they were right in front of him, and he had no idea how to get past them. His mind flashed to Nick, that stupid, reckless bastard, the one who had bragged about their heists, tweeted about their crimes, and ultimately sold Ellis out without a second thought. Nick's arrogance had been his downfall, and Ellis couldn't help but feel a deep, bitter sense of betrayal. But Nick wasn't the only one at fault. They had both been in this together, and now Ellis was being forced into a corner. The two FBI agents stood silently watching him. They knew the stakes. The pressure was mounting. They were waiting for him to crack. "I can't do this," Ellis whispered, his voice breaking as he spoke the words aloud. "I can't just turn on them." The agent in front of him, the one with the colder demeanor, stepped closer. "Ellis, think about this. You're already caught. We know everything. But we're offering you a way out. Help us bring down the rest of your group, and you could get a reduced sentence. If you don't, well, you'll be facing a lot more than just a few years in juvenile detention. You're looking at serious federal time." Ellis swallowed hard. His mind raced. The agent's words echoed in his head, but they didn't feel real. It was like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. "Do you think I'll get away with it?" he asked, his voice shaky, as though he were trying to convince himself more than anyone else. "You said you already have everything. If I talk, you'll just send me to prison anyway. What's the point?" The agent paused, considering his words. "The point is, you're still a minor, Ellis. You have a chance to minimize the consequences. But if you keep silent, if you keep hiding behind your hacker group, you're only making things worse. You'll drag your life down with every choice you make. You need to think about your future." Ellis glanced at the ground, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel his entire world falling apart around him. The excitement he'd once felt, the thrill of stealing, the rush of outsmarting the system, all of it felt distant now. He was trapped, and there was no escape. In the silence that stretched on, Ellis thought about his mom. She had always been there, supporting him, even when he kept his world hidden from her. The look of shock on her face when the agents arrived. It haunted him. He'd done this to her. He'd pulled her into this mess. She didn't deserve any of it. She didn't deserve to lose her son to a life behind bars. But was he ready to turn on everyone else? To betray the hacker group that had, in some sick way, become his family? These were people he had worked with, shared secrets with, and, in the case of Nick, people who had stood by him when they had no other allies. His mind flitted to Turpin, the man whose $24 million had been so carelessly stolen. Turpin was angry, and Ellis knew that. He knew the billionaire would stop at nothing to get his revenge, and Turpin wasn't going to forget about him, not after what he had done. Ellis's gaze drifted back to the agents. The offer was on the table, clear as day. Cooperate, save himself, and likely reduce the time he'd serve. Or refuse, and face a future where he would live the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. Finally, with a long, shaky breath, Ellis made the decision that would alter everything. "I'll help," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. "I'll cooperate." The weight lifted from his chest, but only slightly. It wasn't relief. It was just a shift. A shift from being a criminal who thought he was invincible to being a pawn in the system's game. The agent nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good choice, Ellis. We'll start with Nick." At the mention of Nick's name, Ellis felt a pang of betrayal run through him, but he didn't speak. The truth was, he had no choice now. The system would crush him if he didn't comply, and he had to make sure he came out of this with his life intact, even if it meant bringing down everyone else. The next few weeks were a blur. Ellis spent hours with the FBI, walking them through everything he had done. He explained the SIM swapping techniques, the hacking group's methods, how he'd gained access to Turpin's crypto wallets, and how the stolen funds had been laundered. He gave them everything he had. The faces of the hackers in his group blurred together, and with each confession, Ellis felt a part of himself slip further away. They weren't just online names now. They were real people with real consequences, and he was bringing them all down. Nick, it seemed, was already spilling his guts to the feds. The arrogant tweets, the reckless bragging, it had all come back to haunt him. The feds had pieced together his story, and Nick's betrayal had sealed his fate. While Ellis was still facing criminal charges, Nick had quickly become the prime suspect. In an odd twist of fate, it was Nick's mistakes that had led to Ellis's cooperation. And now, as Ellis watched his former crew get picked off one by one, he couldn't help but feel like a piece of his soul was dying. Each arrest, each confession, felt like the end of a chapter. One he could never undo. Part 6. The Price of Betrayal. The room felt suffocating. Ellis sat across from two FBI agents, his hands clammy, his heart still pounding in his chest. His mind was far away, drifting in a fog of regret and confusion. He had made the choice, the one that would change everything. He had cooperated. He had turned on everyone he'd once called a friend, a colleague, a partner in crime. But now, as the days blurred together, Ellis wasn't so sure he had made the right decision. He had given the FBI everything they wanted. Every detail about his online group, every method they used, every single hack and SIM swap he'd been involved in. He had laid out the entire plan for them, piece by piece, like a jigsaw puzzle. It was all there. And with each confession, he could feel himself becoming more and more isolated from the life he had built, from the world he had ruled in the shadows. And it wasn't just about the hackers anymore. No, it was deeper than that. The world that had once been Ellis's playground, the world of codes, encryption, and digital manipulation, had become a cage. A place where he had no control, no power, just a young kid with a mountain of mistakes following him like a shadow. But this was the price of betrayal, wasn't it? The cost of choosing survival over loyalty. The FBI agents had been patient with him, guiding him through his confession and asking for more details. They didn't seem angry. They weren't even surprised. It was as if they had known all along. They knew who he was. They knew what he was capable of. One of the agents, the one with a sharper edge to his demeanor, finally spoke up. "Ellis, you're not in this alone. You've given us valuable information, but you're still a minor. You need to understand the situation you're in. You cooperated. That's a big factor, but you're still looking at significant charges. The money you stole, the crimes you committed, they're not something you can just walk away from." Ellis glanced up at him, his throat dry. "What's going to happen to me? I was just a kid. I didn't know it would get this far." The agent's face softened slightly. "I get it. You were a teenager playing a dangerous game, but that doesn't change the fact that you stole $24 million in crypto, hurt a lot of people, and made life-altering choices. You can't undo what you've done, but you can still make the right decisions from here on out." Ellis bit his lip. He hadn't realized how much the consequences weighed on him until that moment. He had always been careful, always managed to stay one step ahead, until now. His mind flashed to the luxurious items he'd bought. The Audi R8, the Louis Vuitton jackets, the $50,000 watch. He thought about the nights spent popping bottles at exclusive clubs, living like a king, thinking he was untouchable. But in the end, it had all been an illusion, a short-lived fantasy. And now, he was paying for it. He would lose it all. He thought of his mom. She had always tried to protect him. She never knew what he was doing behind closed doors. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to lose her son to the law. "Do you regret it?" the agent asked, watching him closely. Ellis stared at the floor. "I don't know if regret even covers it, but I can't undo any of it. I just want to get out of this. I want to move on with my life." The agent nodded. "We'll work with you on that, Ellis. But you need to keep cooperating. You need to help us understand the whole picture. Everything. Who are the others involved in your crew? We need the full names, the methods they used, the places they operated out of." Ellis's stomach churned. Nick, the others. He had already spilled so much, but now, with the full weight of what he had done pressing down on him, it felt impossible to betray them any further. It wasn't just about the law anymore. It was about his sense of self, his own identity. Was he really the person the agent saw him as? A criminal? A hacker? Or was he just a kid who got in over his head? "I already told you everything," Ellis said, his voice weak. "I gave you everything. Isn't that enough?" The agent leaned forward, his eyes hardening. "Ellis, the more you give us, the better it'll be for you. You have no idea how deep this goes. It's not just a few stolen accounts or crypto wallets. You've been a part of something much bigger, something that spans across borders, involves organized crime, and has attracted international attention. If you don't give us the full picture, you'll be left holding the bag, and it won't just be a slap on the wrist." Ellis's pulse quickened. The reality of what he had done was starting to sink in. It wasn't just his life on the line anymore. This was global. This was serious. He glanced back at the agent, his eyes narrowing with resolve. "You want more? Fine, but you have to promise me something." The agent raised an eyebrow. "What do you want, Ellis?" "I want out. I want to make sure I'm not just another kid they throw away. I need to know what happens to me. If I cooperate, if I help you take down the whole operation, will I get a chance at a normal life? Will I get a second chance?" There was a pause. The agent exchanged a look with his partner and then nodded. "We'll make sure you have the opportunity for redemption, Ellis. We'll take your cooperation into account. But this is on you now. It's your choice." Ellis felt a slight glimmer of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. He had a chance to fix the mess he had made of his life. But first he had to finish what he started. Ellis's world had changed in ways he hadn't even imagined. The arrest of his fellow hackers was supposed to bring closure, but it didn't. The weight of what he had done, of the millions he had stolen, still hung over him. No amount of cooperation, no matter how many criminals he helped put behind bars, could erase the damage he had caused. The feds had done their part, and they had kept their promise. They had helped him, offered him a way out, and assured him that his cooperation would lead to a lesser sentence. But now, it was time for Ellis to face the consequences. He had cooperated fully with law enforcement. He had worked tirelessly to help them bring down the entire operation. But no matter how much good he had done, there were still the victims, still the stolen funds, still the lives he had impacted. And in the end, there was a price to pay for everything. The court proceedings were grueling. The FBI had helped him craft his defense, and his lawyer had argued for a lenient sentence based on his cooperation. They made it clear that Ellis had been a minor when the crimes took place, and that he had done everything in his power to help law enforcement. But the prosecutors didn't make it easy for him. They painted him as a cold, calculating criminal who had stolen millions, manipulated the system, and caused harm to countless victims. Ellis sat in the courtroom, his mind racing. He had been caught in a system he couldn't escape. The judge had the power to determine his fate, and no amount of pleading or cooperating could change the fact that he had broken the law in ways that could never be undone. "Ellis Ramirez," the judge said, his voice stern as he looked down at the young hacker. "You've confessed to multiple charges of computer fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and the theft of $24 million from a victim who had no part in your crimes. You've shown remorse and cooperation, and I acknowledge that. But the law is the law, and the consequences of your actions cannot be ignored." Ellis's heart pounded as the judge's words echoed in his mind. He had been prepared for this moment, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of hearing it aloud. The stakes were high. His future, his freedom, everything he had worked for was on the line. "The court has taken into consideration your age and the cooperation you've provided to law enforcement," the judge continued. "However, you will still face the full weight of your actions. You will be sentenced to 5 years in a juvenile detention facility, with the possibility of parole after 2 years based on good behavior." Ellis's breath caught in his throat. 5 years. It wasn't as harsh as it could have been, but it felt like a lifetime. 5 years in a place where he would have to pay for his mistakes every day. 5 years away from his family, his friends, the life he had once known. He had cooperated, yes. He had helped bring down the entire criminal network. But none of that changed the fact that he had stolen millions of dollars, destroyed lives, and manipulated the system for his own gain. The judge's voice was now a blur, the words meaningless. Ellis's mind was spinning, trying to process the weight of the sentence. 5 years wasn't a death sentence, but it was close enough. The judge continued. "You will also be required to pay restitution to the victims of your crimes. The $24 million will be part of that restitution, and you will be held financially accountable for your actions. If you fail to meet the conditions set forth by the court, you will be subject to the full penalties of the law." The courtroom fell silent as the judge brought the gavel down. Ellis was sentenced. He had done the work, cooperated, confessed, and still, there was a price to pay. A hefty price. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Ellis whispered, his voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to destroy everything we had." His mother's eyes filled with tears. "You made mistakes, Ellis, but you're still my son, and I'll always love you no matter what."